Well, good morning. Happy Monday. It's August 7th. Want to share with you the latest data here in the Austin metro area. Starting with interest rates again, we're still seeing 7% and above for most of the main products that buyers are using right now. Wanted to share with you the 30-year fixed rate mortgage rates. The bottom line here is 6.8%. So if I go all the way back to May 22nd, you can see we've been above the bottom of that chart, which is 6.8% ever since then. We've gone over 7, 1, 2, 3, 4 times at least. And so mortgage rates just continues to be a driver. I'm sure buyers are going to get used to it at some point, but something's got to give. It's either got to be price or time or something like that when you have high mortgage rates. And I just know there's a lot of malaise in the market with buyers just waiting for this chart to look different. And right now it's not looking different. So high mortgage rates has been the story. We're almost going in now to our third month with 6.8 or higher. On top of that, it's just putting some downward pressure on buyers. Here is original price versus sold price for 2023 so far. So when we started the year, homes were selling around 445. They kept going down into February before we got kind of the spring bounce. We kind of bottomed out around 430. The green is the list prices. So sellers were still thinking, hey, it's the spring. I want to test a higher list price. So on average, the market was at 530, almost 531 for the list price. By the time they sold, the market was closing around 442. That's like a $90,000 gap. What's happened over the spring is the sellers have gotten the word that the market is more challenging. The list prices on average have been coming down. The sold prices actually went up through June. That's pretty typical. And I'll show you a chart here in a second that kind of shows you why. But typically we do see a little bounce in price as we get into the spring. Peaked out around 475 in June. We've now finished July, but you can see the list prices came down. You know, we were trending on about 522 in June. And July, it was down to 499. So we're seeing the list prices coming down as sellers get more conscious of the challenge of this market. And then, of course, we just saw for the first time June to July, the sales price drop about 15 grand median price on average. This is more the normal seasonality of that bell curve that I'll show you here in a second. But again, we're going to see the list prices and sold price. If they get closer, that's good. That kind of tends to show us there's some more stability, but it's also showing us that the market is having kind of that late summer slowdown. Here is the historical sales price trend all the way back from 2023. And you can see where it really left, the racetrack, left the rails. So 2020, 2013, 14, 15, see these little camel humps right here. So basically the spring is the upside. You got the wobbly summer, and then it trickles down in the fall, and then spring, down, up and down. Well, what happens is when you got to the pandemic, we were starting that. And then, of course, here's where COVID hit, and we kind of had a little drop. And then, boom, it was off to the races for like 2 years, just nothing holding anybody back. Cheap money. Everybody was out buying houses. People were sending money to Austin to buy houses. They didn't even live here. They wanted to own a piece of Austin. And so we went crazy on price. Now, we have had a sharp decline from last summer to about February. This was our spring, okay? And now we're going to be on a down cycle as we get into the fall and winter, just like all of these little camel humps over here to the left. The difference is we're still way up here. So if you were following this trend line, we should be somewhere in the mid to upper 300,000 range for our median home price. And if you'll remember on that last chart, we're still up in the 460 range. So we're probably still 100 grand more than had COVID not happened and the traditional trends stayed on track. But of course, the government pumped a bunch of money into the system. That money is still out there. The jobs are increasing. Inflation is real. So we are actually going to see a higher amount of inflation on home values and things like that from this historical trend line. The question is where? And that's where the market is trying to discover where that is right now. So I do think once all this settles out, we are going to be a little higher than this historical trend line because of inflation, because of the extra money, but it's going to take maybe another year before we really get away from this big pile of COVID right there to kind of see where the new trend line is going to set and take place. So maybe by the end of next year, we'll be able to see something that looks a little closer to this coming back over here on the right-hand side of the chart. But when you see this chart, you can really see just how dislocated price got during COVID. So we're coming back to normal. And I know sellers don't like to hear that, but this is where the market used to be and where it's trying to trend right now. So after looking at that, hey, here's the fun part of Austin right now, okay? Here's our 7-day forecast. This is what it looked like last week, the week before, the week before, the week before, the week before. And so we are in this kind of repetitive cycle of the same. And what's happening is interest rates are high and they're the same, and price is high and they're the same. And, you know, there's just not a lot of buyer activity in the market. People are waiting. They're waiting for something to happen. They're waiting for interest rates to change. They're waiting for the temperatures to change. They're waiting for fall to show up. So right now we're kind of in this malaise. We're seeing extremely low buyer activity. Open houses aren't getting people showing up. There's a few buyers out there. I think we're on the very front end of kind of the fall buying season. But if you're a family, if you have kids, you know, public schools are going to start next week. And so what's happening is people are getting back, kind of preparing for the fall. But a lot of them are not shopping in mass yet. And so my prediction is August is going to be pretty bleak. It's going to be slow. There's not going to be a lot of activity on homes. We're going to need to get back into that kind of fall swing where the kids are in school. There's kind of a repetitive schedule. And then I think you're going to see people start to get back out there. And ideally, these temperatures will break a little bit. So if you are a seller right now, you have to be aware that, like, there's so few buyers, you got to be the best thing they can buy right now, because there's literally not going to be a lot of traffic week to week on most homes. We're seeing on average 0 to 1, maybe 2 showings if you're lucky. So extremely slow. I showed a property with a buyer this weekend. Listing agent reached out to me and said I was the only person that's shown their house in 3 weeks. So it's slow. So if you're a seller, look at your price, look at your competition, and ask yourself, do you want to be the best thing on the market right now? Or are you willing to stay patient and wait, because you may have to wait for a while before the market activity picks up a little bit more. If you're a buyer, the opposite is true. You may have a window here where, knowing there's not a lot of activity on these properties, hey, you could be able to go see that property, you know, put an offer in there and have a conversation with the seller while you know there's no competition. I can't guarantee what the next 4, 5, 6 weeks are going to look like. I think at least the next 2 or 3 are going to look like this until we get back into the fall and maybe these prices break, or sorry, temperatures break. We'll see something like that. Anyways, I hope this was helpful. It gives you kind of a higher level perspective of what's happening here in the market. If you want to follow all our videos, check out @RyanKellyGroup on YouTube. You can see all of them there. And of course, if you know anybody buying, selling, or investing in Austin, we would love the opportunity to talk with them. Until then, yikes, go find a pool, jump in it, and drink something with ice in it. Until then, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.